Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. Do you know someone who has gone to prison? Have you served a sentence yourself? Does someone close to you, maybe a coworker, a friend, loved one, or love someone who is in prison right now that you may not even know about? Today, we're talking about what it's like to love and care for someone in prison. Incarceration affects the lives of so many in our country and our state. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, Tennessee has more than 55,000 people in local jails and state and federal prisons, making it the state with the 8th highest incarceration rate in the country. I'll say that again. It's the state with the 8th highest incarceration rate in the country. Now, when someone goes to prison, they aren't the only ones to live out their sentence. Family members, spouses, children, siblings, grandparents, and friends, all of their lives are impacted by the entire experience. To stay connected, family and friends also have to navigate procedures set by individual facilities to figure out how to visit or call and how to give money to their loved ones so they can purchase things from the prison commissary like hygiene items, soap, toothpaste, clothes, and a few things like socks and food. And on top of that, they were dealing with their own feelings about the sentence that their loved one is serving, and often in judgment of others about having someone, a loved one, a friend, who is in prison. It's not an easy experience, or one that any family would want to sign up for. One small comfort is that those with a loved one who is incarcerated are not alone, and there are some resources available to help, though they could use a lot more support to families. So here to share their experience of loving someone through incarceration in Tennessee is Rick Lemieux. He has a stepson who is on death row outside of Nashville. And like many, Rick doesn't live near where his loved one was incarcerated. He stayed at the Family Reconciliation House. That is a nonprofit here in Nashville that provides free lodging to those visiting someone incarcerated here in the state. Rick, thank you very much for joining us remotely. Welcome to This Is Nashville, my friend.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate you being here. Tell me this, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
It's good to hear. Now, you're not a local in Nashville, but you visit your stepson who's incarcerated here. Can you tell us, where do you live? Where are you traveling from?
We're in Johnson City right now in East Tennessee.
Okay.
Before we moved here, we were living in Oklahoma, central Oklahoma, and we used to travel from there until we moved here.
That must have been quite a trip. I do want to talk about that a little bit later, but answer this for me. Before your stepson was incarcerated, did you know anyone else who was incarcerated who served jail time?
I thought about that, and I really don't have anybody in mind that I knew.
It was the first time you're experiencing this. I understand. Now,
Yeah.
he's your stepson, but you consider him a son.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my wife and I have been married 43 years, and I've known John, of course, since he was a teenager.
So you helped raise him into adolescence and into adulthood. Tell us about him. What do you love and appreciate about him?
John was always a loving boy, and he was a normal kid. He loved the outdoors. He loved to fish. We were in Alaska, so he did a lot of skiing up there. He loved that. And he got along really well with my kids. He knew them. And I have 2 other sons. And he's a normal kid. And as time went on, I couldn't tell you what really happened as he was an adult. Got into, I have no idea what influenced him to be involved and to end up where he is.
And I understand.
Yeah. But even to this day, he's always happy to see us when we do visit. Unfortunately, because his we're both in our 80s, and sometimes it's pretty hard to make a trip. Health wise, we don't get to go up there as often as we would like to. Um, but so we have good visits while we're there. He's glad to see us. He's still got a good sense of humor after 35 years of waiting for that other shoe to fall. So I don't know how he does it.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with him, really.
You know, we often hear that when someone goes to prison, their family serves that sentence too. Can you take us back to that time very briefly and share with us, please, how you felt when you found out the verdict and knew that, you know, your stepson, your loved one, would be serving this sort of prison sentence?
It really, of course, upset us. We were pretty in shock ever since he was arrested. It really destroyed my wife, really, once they came down with the penalty. I mean, that night I ended up taking her to the hospital, and she had to be sedated, and she spent the night there. And over the years, especially during December, that's the month he was arrested. So Christmases have always been difficult for her, being a mom, and I really spent the years worrying more about her and her health and than I normally would, because it's difficult. It's difficult to even talk about it, actually.
I understand, and I appreciate you sharing this with us, because what I'm gathering is, you know, some people think that, okay, how have you adjusted to this new reality? But it sounds to me like you all are still adjusting every day to this, huh?
It's with us every day. And I mentioned John's there waiting for the other shoe to fall. Well, we are too. Yeah. And we, you know, he's still alive after 35 years. He's still there. Somebody's working on his behalf to try to maybe get the penalty overturned.
And, you know, and the penalty that he received is the most extreme that's out there. And I know.
Absolutely.
And I hear the shock that you told us that your wife has gone through, and I can hear it in your voice how you're being affected. Did you all ever consider reaching out for support over the past 35 years to kind of help you, you know, adjust to the penalty that John, your stepson, has been rendered? Rick, you with us? I think we lost Rick momentarily. We are going to try to get him back on the line very quickly. Rick, can you hear me? Rick, are you with us? Okay, we lost Rick temporarily. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to move on with the show. Okay, we're going to take one quick break. Heads up to our listeners, we're going to have links to support resources, including the Family Reconciliation Center, on today's web post. They are in need of volunteers and support and donations. We're going to take a short break, work out some technical difficulties. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the experience of kids who have an incarcerated parent. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Today, we're talking about support services for people who have loved ones, family, and friends who are currently incarcerated. Now, before the break, I was talking with Rick Lemieux, who is a gentleman whose stepson is serving a death row sentence. And he and his wife have been visiting over the years to really help and see him and to be with him. We're going to see if we can get Rick back on the line. Do we have Rick back on the line? We do. Rick.
You do. I'm here.
Excellent, sir. Thank you so much for being here with us. Really apologize about that technical difficulty. I was asking, did you consider reaching out for support during this time over the past 35 years to help you and your wife and the rest of your family really adjust to, what John is facing?
Excuse me. Yes, we had. In fact, we've talked to our pastor, especially in Oklahoma when we were there, a number of different times. We've talked to our pastor here in Tennessee, and we've opened up to some close friends who are very receptive and accepting, and that's the key. The accepting. You mentioned that their parents feel like they've been convicted as well, and honestly, it's amazing how many people would act as if we were bad parents. We didn't raise him right. We probably taught him how to try to get away with stuff. I don't understand their thinking because all of us, none of us actually is what we were when we were teenagers, when we were young, even in our early 20s. As we grow older, of course, we change, and hopefully we do if we're on a wrong track somewhere. So
yeah,
I don't know if that helps. I hope.
I believe it can help somebody who's listening. That's why we do this show. You said you all used to live in Oklahoma and you would visit. And, during that time, visiting from central Oklahoma all the way out here to Tennessee in the Nashville area to visit your stepson, how much time and money did you have to dedicate to each visit?
I don't know that I've ever figured it out, but as far as the money, we have spent an enormous amount of money as a result of John being incarcerated, and lawyers, on the transportation itself. At the time, we would stay in with my wife's parents who were living in Morristown. So we would drive to Morristown and sometimes from Morristown go to the prison on the way back home, or we would just go to Nashville and back. It was about I think it was about 11 hours from where we lived in Oklahoma to the prison. So there's 11 hours of driving one way and then back, meals. Yeah, there was a good deal of money and time, but it's something we had to do.
Now, in recent years, you and your wife discovered the Family Reconciliation House, which is here in Nashville, and they offer free accommodation for people visiting incarcerated loved ones. It's a nonprofit that owns a small house in Nashville with about 5 bedrooms. It can sleep 15 people at a time. Last year, the FRC hosted 350 nights out of the year, and they provide lodging, clean bedding, and often meals for people who are traveling in. Now, you stayed there. How did you all find out about the Family Reconciliation Center?
Well, John had mentioned it to us on one of our visits. We had spent many nights in hotels, not knowing about it, but on one visit he mentioned them. And as we were leaving the prison after a visit, we met a lady who was affiliated with the Reconciliation House, and she gave us information, told us about it, and then the following visit, because she had given us the phone number and told us who to contact, we did contact the Reconciliation House, and they accepted us with open arms. I can't believe how good these people are. It's just amazing.
Walk us through what it's like to stay there.
Certainly better than a hotel, in my opinion. They're They give us a combination to the door, so we could come and go as we pleased. They had a kitchen. They had some food there, snacks. Um, we've been offered meals while we were there. There was a time or two we took them up on that, but generally we figure they're going to enough expense offering us the house itself. So we would normally go out to a restaurant or something. Um, but it's always clean. It's always comfortable. It's they really make us feel at home.
What does it mean to you to be able to stay there?
These are good people. It makes us feel that we're understood. You know, as a prisoner's family member. That they understand that we're going through something, and we know they're offering us help to at least minimize our efforts, our spending, and the feeling of acceptance is what comes to mind.
With that, let me ask you this final question, sir. You know, what do you want others, especially ones who don't have experience who haven't had the experience that you have? What do you want them? What do you want the rest of us to know about what it's like to have a family member in prison and some of the difficulties you all face?
Well, it's going to be pretty shocking to them or anybody. The beginning, the early times when we had to go through metal detection, searched, patted down. It's worse than going through TSA at the airport. And yet we've accepted that because they got to control the flow of what people bring into the prison, and there's probably no other way to do that. So be prepared. The prison staff, for the most part, the ones we've talked to, they've all treated us well. They're it's hard to say and just find the right words, but I feel they've treated us well when we were there. They know it. We're not the ones that committed any kind of a crime. We're there to visit somebody in a family or a friend, whoever it might be. It's hard though, and it's hard just to know you have to do that. It's part of our life until the courts come up with some kind of decision how they're going to terminate this sentence.
Yeah, I understand. And I thank you very much for being here with us. And thank you for expressing, how you've been feeling in your candor, Rick. Really appreciate it, sir.
All right. You're welcome, sir.
Yeah, Rick Lemieux, he is his stepson who is on death row outside of Nashville again, sir. Mr. Lemieux, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Now we're going to turn our attention to what it's like to have a parent in prison if you're a kid. Because having an incarcerated parent is hard. Sometimes the loss of that parent is sudden and maybe even it can be a traumatic experience for a family. And once a parent's in prison, kids, they lose that regular daily routines and the connection that they used to have and that they've become used to. They experience all these emotions of growing up on top of adjusting to having their parent in prison and being able to visit if they're able to. And unfortunately, a lot of kids in our state and country have a parent in prison. And it can be a very confusing experience and one that is very difficult to talk about. Here to share more about what can help young people with an incarcerated parent is Chantel Baker. She's a clinical mental health counselor who works with young people, and Risha Kidd, a director of community and youth engagement for the Tennessee Prison Outreach Ministry. Chantel, welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you.
And Risha, so good to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Now, Chantel, I understand that you have experience with family members who have gone through incarceration. You grew up with your dad in prison, right?
Correct.
Do you remember how you learned that your dad was in prison?
Not really. I was so young. My dad probably went to prison sometime before I was born. I just remember, so the early years of him is a blur. My mom died when I was 4, so he had just probably gotten out of prison just a little bit before my mom passed away. And so after my mom passed away, we lived with our grandparents, and he was just in and out. And so his parents, my grandmother, so we would go with her because I have 2 older brothers, but I also have a brother that's incarcerated now. And so we would go every Saturday with my grandmother to visit my dad at the prison, the wall.
Yeah.
And when the gentleman was talking earlier, when he said, the going to visit as a child, I feel like that was very traumatic for me because at the wall, they have these big clanky doors and it would just slam so hard behind you. And I just would always remember jumping. It never became like a norm. That was always the case. But, I tell people that between my father being incarcerated and my brother being incarcerated, you do the time with those family members. And I feel like I was like, you know what? I've never broken the law to the point to where I had to go to prison, but I feel like I've been there because I've visited so much. And it was hard. I didn't have a normal childhood on Saturdays. You get up, you want to watch the cartoons. Nope. I got up every Saturday. I got dressed, waited for my grandmother to come pick us up, and I would ride to Nashville with her. So that was my Saturday.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, Risha, you work for the Tennessee Prison Outreach Ministries. Can you tell us quickly about them and some of the programs that you run there?
Yeah, so Tennessee Prison Outreach Ministry has been in operation for over 60 years. We have 4 houses. We serve men and women coming out of incarceration. We start the relationship on the inside where we have programming on the inside of the prisons. We serve all the prisons across the state of Tennessee and most of the jails. Specifically, I work with kids impacted by parental incarceration in the juvenile detention facilities. So what some of those programs look like is we have our annual Camp Cope, which is every summer. It's a week-long program, summer camp for kids impacted by incarceration, ages 8 to 17. It's absolutely free. It's a therapeutic camp. We also do a lot of programming in the juvenile detention facilities. Some of that programming looks like our book club. We have tutoring and we have worship services. And then we have events later on in the year, which is our fall events, just encouragement, uplift, shoe drives. And then we have our Christmas event every year, which serves kids impacted by parental incarceration and their caregivers. So we have that usually on our campus, but for a time prior to COVID hitting, we would actually go inside the jails and present presents to the parents to give to their kids.
Wow! So you spend a lot of time around kids,
yes,
who are living in these situations. What has stood out to you about, what you've seen young people feel, or maybe what they need to process, the ones who are going through this?
Yes. There's a lot of emotions. One of the ones I can really think of, or some of them, would be confusion, anger, and abandonment. So trying to process all those, being a child, we try to process those as adults.
Good luck.
Right. It's already complicated enough. Now let's put that on a child, 8 to 17, right? And one of the camps that we had actually in 2023, our topic was forgiveness. And like I said, we have, it's a therapeutic camp, so we have counselors on site, but seeing in real time children deal with forgiving their parent for quote unquote leaving or abandoning or not choosing me over while they're incarcerated, and just dealing and processing that. And a lot of times, again, children have already so much going on, from school to homework to social media influences and things of that nature. And then you put on top of that, you have a parent incarcerated.
Yeah.
And you really don't know how to talk about that. Or if you do talk about that, you're stigmatized, right? So some of the emotions that I've seen them trying to process are that abandonment, that confusion, and just sadness and anger.
Chantel, are these some emotions familiar to you that you experienced growing up visiting your dad?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As she was talking, I was just kind of, having little, flashbacks and thinking about all the other children who have, been in my position and in my position today. And as a therapist, I've worked with several children. I have several clients now who have parents incarcerated, and definitely that, feeling abandoned, like, why was I not enough for you not to go out and to commit this crime? And when I thought about it, I looked at it from like the stages of grief. There's, the anger, there's denial, there's bargaining, there's depression, and then you get or try to get to that of acceptance, which is also somewhat of forgiveness. And you can go through all of those at one time, but definitely the abandonment is what I see, is what I felt most. And unfortunately, if those emotions are not properly addressed, then you carry that with you. It goes into your adulthood, and then you have to try to navigate it then. And so it becomes a little bit harder. So I love the fact that, the mental health part of that is being addressed with kids who have parents incarcerated, because it's really, really important for them to be able to express their emotions of how they feel and to be able to do it honestly. To be able to do it honestly, I think that that's something that sometimes can be missed, because you're going to visit this person in prison, right? They're already locked up. You're saying, okay, I don't want to make my dad, I don't want to make my mom or whomever feel bad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, put on a smile and, make this a happy visit and just talk about all the good things. But, that's to that person's detriment, because they're not able to really express how they're feeling. And not only the child, but just the family unit,
Let me ask you about that, because what do you want families who may be in this situation about how they can support children who have a family member in prison? Like, what can immediate family members do and other adults do in the child's life to help support that young person?
When I look back and I think about myself, I would have hoped, I would have loved if my grandparents had put me in therapy, if they had given me the outlet to talk to someone who was not going to judge me, who was just going to sit and listen. Because the family unit, sometimes you just kind of sweep it under the rug. You don't talk about what really happened. You don't talk about the why. You go to visit, but again, it has to be a happy visit. And so no one's expressing, nobody's processing all of those emotions. You talk about like the stigma of a child. I remember like my best friend, she didn't even know that my dad was incarcerated.
Yeah, you were too embarrassed to tell her.
Yeah, I never talked. Well, I never talked about it, and she thought he was dead because my mother had passed away, and she was like, "Oh, you never talked about your dad." So, I get that. I had a client, and I didn't know his father was incarcerated and I had been seeing this kid for a while. And it wasn't until the day he was like, his mood had changed. And I was like, something's different about you today. What's going on? And he was like, my dad's getting out of prison. And I was like, wow, really? I didn't know that. And so, it's just don't want to talk about it, because it's like you said, it's the stigma. You feel embarrassed. The gentleman before, he talks about how, society perceives you, like you played a part in the crime when you had nothing to do with it. And so that is another reason why a lot of times people just, we just stay quiet and we don't say anything. But definitely therapy. I would like to see more support groups for those kids to be able to get with other kids, like your camps, like, hey, you're not alone in this. You're not the only one. Today, I think it's estimated that like 2.7 million kids are impacted by a parent that is incarcerated. That's a lot.
That's a lot of
children. Exactly.
And so, Risha, what can make prison visits easier for kids? It's, as Chantel said, they want it to be a happy visit, and obviously, understandably, for the child and also for the person who is incarcerated, right? And there's a short amount of time together. But Chantel just expressed the bottled up feelings that aren't necessarily expressed. And who knows if they'll ever be expressed, right? What are suggestions for how families and kids can plan for visits, or when they even talk to their loved one over the phone who's incarcerated?
Yes. So I think what's very important is having that proactive conversation prior to getting to the prison, right? So having a conversation between the caregiver or the parent who the child is staying with, and already starting those conversations so it's not an awkward situation when they show up at the jail or the prison. So already starting those conversations with that caregiver, the parent or the grandparent, whoever they're staying with, I think it's also important. I too had two brothers impacted by incarceration. So what was helpful was the writing of letters or the talking on the phone, right? And that lessens the elephant in the room, right? So when they're actually going, it's like a continual conversation. It's a continual bonding. So I think it's very important not to wait to get to the facility to start the communication and to start the bonding process. It's before then.
So what you're saying is, in writing a letter, a child can express, hello, mother or father, how are you? Is that an appropriate time and place to express the disappointment or the feeling of abandonment? You know, and because I imagine through that correspondence, things can be explained. Therefore, in the precious time when they're in physical presence, it can hopefully be a little bit more celebratory. What do you think, Chantel?
The writing of the letters, I see that. My dad wrote me a lot of letters when he was in prison. I didn't talk to him a lot on the phone. I don't know. You know, I'm older. My brother's incarcerated. I was that kid going, I don't know if it ever gets easier, if easy is the word to be used. I maybe manage. You manage going to visit, because even I now as an adult, I still get some anxiety when I go visit my brother just because of the process alone. Now they have this cute little machine that you can stand on and it zips you through to make sure, you know, but before that you had to go in, you had to be patted down, you had to take off your shoes, you had to lift this up and lift that up. And I, as an adult, if I'm feeling anxiety, imagine a child. Yeah. You know, my kids, they've gone. They go. So, you know, I don't know. Easy, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to say. And it's, you know, per each individual. I think you just learn how to manage that you're going into, you know, to visit into prison, and it can cause, you know, some anxiety, and it's just individually how that works. But I can't even, kids now, it's hard.
What do you imagine kids need to help them better manage these situations?
Like she said, the talk before you go, the asking, how are you feeling? Because then sometimes they may not want to go, you know, and if they don't want to go, you don't push them to go. Like, okay, well, maybe little Johnny wants to stay home today. And so I just think that prepping, like you said, before you go in, you know, I kind of do that with my son now before we go see my brother, and he's 15, you know, and then you have to ask him, you got anything in your pocket? You know, it's a lot. Just the process of going to visit creates anxiety, in my opinion.
What about the drive home after the visit?
The drive home. The drive home for me throughout the years, I don't really remember the drive home with Dad because I was so young. And I didn't process any of that at that age. My dad stopped going to prison around 8th grade. My brother went my 12th grade year. So I've been visiting him. He's still incarcerated since then. And I think for me, the drive home, and I've had this conversation with my brother, is okay because he's okay. You know, we're able to talk about how he feels, and we have those hard, honest conversations. So when you're having those conversations and you really know that the person is okay and they've processed a lot of their emotions being incarcerated, then you're okay. So there were a lot of times when I've walked away and, you know, I was happy because I knew my brother was okay. Yeah.
Final question for you both. I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this. I mean, what do you want others? This relates to the stigma that Rick talked about that both of you have mentioned. You know, what can other adults, other kids, what can we community members who aren't in this situation, what can we do to show up better for kids and people who have an incarcerated parent or loved one or friend? What do we have to do to shift our minds and our consciousness around this stigma that we unfairly shed upon others? Risha?
Yeah, I would like to go back to what Chantel said, and I wrote it down in my notes as well. There's 2.7 million children that are impacted by parental incarceration. That's 1 of 8, right, in a classroom setting, right? So in your churches, in your classrooms, on your sports teams, it's highly likely that there is a child that you are engaging with that has an incarcerated parent. So how we normalize those conversations, first, educate yourself. Research some organizations like TPOM, Tennessee Prison Outreach Ministry, and other organizations, family reconciliation, to get a greater understanding how you can better support those children. Not only that, look into mentorship, right? Mentoring opportunities, and to be a listening ear, a safe place, because kids will talk when they feel safe. And that's what I get to experience at camp. Playtime, engagement, and things like that, they just start opening up when they're in a safe place and they're able to just be a kid. And please remove the stigma, that stigma of the bad person's in jail, so you're connected to the bad person. That is not it. Look, we all make bad choices. Some of us don't get caught, right? But we've all made some crazy choices, but others, it's ended them up in prison or in jail. So please be a trusted source, educate yourself, and remove the stigmas.
Chantel, briefly.
Just the love and support, just showing that child, even just the family itself, like Risha said, just love and support and removing that stigma and making them feel like they did something wrong. And kids will open up. I think that, the community, it's not just even the community, just society. We just have to change how we view these kids and let them know that, hey, regardless of, we're still here to love you, to care about you, and support you. And that's what they need.
I really appreciate you both being on the show and appreciate you. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it. Chantel Baker is a clinical mental health counselor who works with young people, and Risha Kidd is the Director of Community and Youth Engagement for the Tennessee Prison Outreach Ministries. Again, thank you both. Really appreciate it. All right, we're taking one last break. When we return, we'll talk with Warden Taryn James, who is the warden at the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center. That's a facility for women near Nashville, about the program that the facility runs that helps families to stay connected. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Kulona, and this is Nashville. Today, we're talking about the impact of incarceration on families. Now, joining us for more is Warden Taryn James. Warden James oversees the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center. It's a facility for women near Nashville. Warden James served in the National Guard, served 3 deployments before starting his career at the Department of Corrections, where he has worked for 19 years. Warden James, thank you for your service, and welcome to This is Nashville, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with a basic question, because some people may think they know, but they may not know. What does a warden do?
Well, the warden is not what you see on television. As the warden of the facility, I'm not only responsible for the inmate population, but as well as the staff. So the complete operations of the facility, to include the management of the budget, the ensuring that resources are there at the facility, everything from the first meal in the morning to the last meal in the evening. Making sure we have appropriate staff coverage, getting offenders where they need to go. We have a work release program, so making sure those offenders are out at those community partners' jobs, and they're reporting to work on time. So it's just the magnitude of things, just ensuring that the overall operation of the facility.
What does your day look like?
What does my day look like? So usually I'm there probably about 7:30 in the morning. First thing I do is I get with my shift commanders, just to check in with them, see how they're doing, see what staff coverage looks like. From there, make sure our breakfast meal is usually already has started and probably at its completion, to make sure breakfast went okay. See that we have anything go out throughout the night, and then kind of plot out what the day looks like. Ensuring that medical appointments are being met, ensuring that we have programs are going to go operational. We have so many programs at DJRC, technical, educational programs, and rehabilitative programs. So making sure that those programs are in place and that we will have coverage in all the buildings throughout the facility.
Okay, so tell me this. What are some of the most common misconceptions that we, the people in the public, have about what prisons are like?
So one of the things I always say, the biggest misconception is that we lock inmates up and throw away the key. That's not true. At DJRC, it's a women's facility, so I'll stick to what we do specifically there. We have everything from adult basic education all the way up to a master's degree program. We partner with prestigious university, Lipscomb University, Nashville State Community College, all come in and they're affording offenders the opportunity to get their higher education. And then we have teachers on staff that are assisting offenders getting their adult high set, their GED. All throughout the facility. And then from there, we partner with TCAT. So we have culinary arts, we have cosmetology, we have computer networking, information technology. We also have core carpentry or core construction. So it's just a magnitude of things that we can do that encourage our offenders to return home better, in a better predicament in the way they came. So those skills are so essential when you talk about reentry. Now they have a marketable skill. So when they're returning to Nashville or anywhere throughout the state, they have something to market themselves to hopefully become productive after their incarceration.
So you got these programs. You all are not locking people up and throwing away the keys.
Correct.
So what is your hope for the inmates at the DJRC?
So my hope as a warden is I just want to see offenders come in which they came. My job has never been, as a warden, is never to punish the offender. The punishment was them coming for the facility. Now my job is to address those factors that may have gotten them there. So my goal is to see them leave better than they came. So if it's a drug treatment, if it's a drug issue, or various crimes, that we get them the services that they need to be better in which they came. So we're addressing those issues and just taking every avenue we can to ensure that reentry services are provided, such as birth certificate, social security card. Those simple necessities are afforded to them as they are exiting our incarceration.
Answer this for me. For someone who has no experience or very little knowledge of what to do or where to go when they're visiting someone who's incarcerated, where would you tell them to start?
The first place I would tell them to start at our website, which is tn.gov/correction. At the top of the page, we have, it's called Constituent Services. If you click on the top, it tells you the basic information you need, what the first 30 days are like of incarceration, what to expect as far as commissary visitation privileges, and then what to expect at the point of release, like, hey, what time should I come in to pick them up? Where should I go? What numbers to call? So that is the first place to start. Also, on that particular page, you can also click to send a message directly to our administration at whatever facility, and we'll get back with you. You normally within 48 hours. Sometimes there's some complex questions. We may have to do a little research, but normally in 48 hours, we'll respond back to you or give you an update on when we should get back with you with the information that you may need.
What should visitors be keeping in mind when it comes to things like, shoes, clothes, and personal items?
So on our website, it lists the particulars about what the dress code is specifically across the state. But I would tell anyone when they come, have that conversation. Have a conversation about the dress code, not just what you have on your person, but what that attire looks like. Ensure it's appropriate for visiting the prison environment. And I think our website does a great job at identifying what would be acceptable or appropriate when coming to visit the facility.
Now, the DJRC has this really unique program where children can visit mothers or grandmothers over a weekend.
Correct.
Tell us more about this program.
So the program was started in 1992 by a former warden called Penny Bernhardt. So what this program does is the offenders' mothers and grandmothers will have the opportunity to have their children, if approved by the guardian, they still, after completing parenting class and a certain criteria, they'll have the opportunity at 6 on Friday. The guardian will drop the child off. They'll go to our visitation child VG area. It's a room where they'll share, and it's one child per offender. and then they spend the entire weekend at the facility with their incarcerated mother or grandmother. So it's a very unique program. They have an opportunity to play games with each other, play games, watch movies. They have their own TV inside there, and it's not a traditional cell. It's a very receptive, very conducive to a mother-child relationship. I remember we had a unique experience where a child came to visit, and their birthday just so happened to fall on that particular weekend. It was nothing scheduled or nothing outside of the norm. It was just the child's birthday fell on that weekend. And just seeing that child being able to link with their mother on their birthday is something that usually wouldn't happen when their mother is incarcerated. But because of this program, they were able to bond during that particular time. So it's a great unification effort between mothers and their children.
What type of impact have you seen for families, particularly the inmates at the DJRC, when they're able to complete one of these visits?
I would say one of the things that I see is just having that relationship. A lot of times that relationship is limited to a 2 to 4 hour visit between the mother and the child, but this oftentimes get them very interactive or engaged in the child's day-to-day process. Take, for instance, you have a mother who may have an infant. So like learning their favorite foods or what they like and don't like. Those are things you wouldn't traditionally get in a traditional visitation environment, but being with the child for that extended period of time, you get used to what are their likes and don't likes. What does their bedtime look like? Reading a bedtime story. Like we have ample books that we have. Some are donated, some we purchase, but just being able to read a story at bedtime, that's something that doesn't traditionally happen. So it's a very unique program that is very important, I think, for mothers trying to keeping reunification and keeping their relationship with their children.
Now, this program has been running since 1992.
Correct.
And it's one of only 2 programs here in Tennessee. Could there potentially be programs for fathers? I'm just thinking about our previous guest, Chantel Baker, who expressed, you heard her, express how she grew up barely getting to understand and know her father because he was in prison. What if they had a program like that for her?
Well, I will tell you, me being with the department for over 20 years, I previously was the superintendent, which is equal to a warden, at the Mark Luttrell Transition Center out in Memphis, Tennessee. We had some unique programs there, which was Ties with Dad. So it actually was a dinner or an outside of visitation where we had a formal dinner where their fathers got to blend with their sons and teach them how to tie ties. So it was just teaching that unique skill. I come from a single parent household. So it wasn't until I actually, throughout my career in the Department of Corrections, where one of my colleagues taught me how to tie a tie.
Yeah.
So that was something that was unique. I was like, fathers should teach their son how to tie ties. So that was a unique program. So we do have unique programs on the male side. It's just we don't have the overnight visitation for the males.
You're entering your 20th year.
I am.
In corrections. You've seen it. You know what it's like for those who are incarcerated. You know what it's like for their families. Correct. And for people who work at the facilities. Let's not forget that. You all are human beings, too, who have your lives outside, but also you're dealing with people. And I could imagine very intense emotional situations that happen at the facility. Got like a minute, barely. What is your hope for the future of incarceration and corrections in the country, particularly the stigma that was mentioned earlier?
One, to resolve the stigma about just locking offenders up and throwing away the key. I think one of the things that I would like to see moving forward is that we are receptive to the programming that we're providing our offender population. I think we do a great job at communicating our story. I think that it's a lot of untapped information that we provide to the general public about what we do, and our staff does a great job, I think, in delivering that information. So I would like to see more people join us as we try to rehabilitate this population. I think these 95% of the offender population in Tennessee are going home. So we're doing our best to ensure that they are productive neighbors and loved ones returning back into the community.
Warren, Warden Taran James oversees the Deborah K. Rehabilitation Center. Warden James, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the work that you're doing, my friend.
All right, and thank you for having me.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Katherine Ceicys. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation never ends here. Call us 615-751-2500 to leave us a message, or you can find us on Blue Sky and Instagram, and you can tweet us at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.